Hello. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tomas. I don't speak French. I'm Venezuelan. I'm an urbanist, and I know about digital fabrication and electronics and some coding and some about cities, also about society. So I try to mix all of that in the work I've been doing at the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia during the last 10 years, where I started the FabLab back in 2007. And now I'm stepping back from the FabLab Barcelona to put all the energy into the Fab City project, which is what I'm going to talk about today. So basically, when we talk about Fab Cities, we need to revisit the way we are making things today and how we transport goods, materials, and value also, how we extract value from places and put it in other places, and which are the consequences of that. No? So if you look at the map of the world today and try to connect it with how we make things, you will understand that we take the raw materials from some places, we turn them into products and objects or pieces of products of objects in other places, then we ship them back to factories, then we ship them to centers of consumption, and then we use these products and turn them into trash, and we just put it somewhere in a landfill, or we send it to some third world country without taking in consideration any consequence, right? So this model has many issues. No? The first one is like we're using a lot of fossil fuels to transport things. Shipping containers, airplanes, carrying products are polluting a lot throwing a lot of carbon emissions into the earth. We are taking the knowledge from the cities and we're putting it somewhere in Asia or somewhere where we can pay really cheap labor. And then also we are not really taking care about, which are the things that we use, how or why we're making those things, and which is the life after we use them. No? So I've been trying to understand the impact of this model of production into cities, this for my urbanism background. And it's really interesting. If you look at this image, this is actually the tooling that you use to inject plastic to make molds of almost every object you use, like screens, fonts, etc. And this looks like a city. It looks like New York City. So it's kind of, the way we make things, it has an impact in our city. No? If you look at the development model back in the early 20th century, especially in the United States, the urban sprawl model is actually the repetition of a pattern, but it's also driven by one very special technology, and by that time was the car. So you can reach with the car to the front of your house, so the city started to expand, right? But if you take it to the European context, and I think that actually you hold one of the masters of social housing in the history of architecture, you see how repetition is part of, again, the manifestation of industrial model in the urban scale. So we started to repeat ways of living. It's standardized. Everyone is the same. No? So it's a factory of a society somehow. But then there's other ways of doing cities. No? Also this sense of power and centralization. And that's why in the 50s, Brazil decided to create a new city. And that was going to be the capital of the city, just from out of scratch, not taking in consideration any social structure and so on. So Lucio Costa planned Brasilia and then brought Oscar Niemeyer to make amazing buildings and making funky with very big avenues where people actually have to take probably a couple minutes to go from one side of the other. No? Low social interaction and the like. Again, another approach to create cities, one example is Milton Keynes City in the UK, conceived as an administration city. Again, it seems like now starts to flourish, but this is a project of almost 40 years now, and we still need to see how this is going to turn on. So recently, we have seen the emergence of high technology into the realm of cities, no? And the expression towards a smart city or creating these kind of futurist scenarios similar to science fiction movies And one of the clear examples is Masdar City by Norman Foster, Van Foster and Partners Office of Architecture. Again, from what we know now, Masdar is empty at the moment and is aimed to be one of the demonstrators of a future technology city with driverless cars and so on and so on and so on. So I don't say they failed yet. I'd say that we yet have to see what happened with these cities. No? So, but then what is the smart city? No? When you think about the city as a platform where the digital and the physical space merge thanks to the digital revolutions we had, where you have to design interactions and especially multi-scalar systems. When you move from your house, when you go to the airport, when you go to buy something in the market, you are dealing with different systems and different scales. And that's what the smart city is promising to that, or at least to optimize. No? But how the smart city looks like for the corporations behind it, no? Or how does the smart city looks like for the cities that are actually promoting it? This is the control operation room in Rio de Janeiro, and this is supposed to be a smart city. So it's a lot of guys looking into screens and trying to press the button of how people move, behave in the city. That's the most stupid smart city you can ever think. And it's not considered at any time. Again, this old technology production is again sustained into a very, very extractive economy in a linear model in which the cities keep being just a big producers of trash. And this tendency is going to grow, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow. So the smart city is just looking to create business and to control people no matter what. I mean, don't give a fuck about what's happening with the world, especially what is the relationship between people, the things they buy, and the work they do, especially where the people is motivated to just be sitting in their house and buy something from a click, where some other people sustain that way of living of really shitty works people hate, to buy things they don't need, no? And to turn them into trash that actually are destroying and compromising the future of the planet. So what about the smart citizens? What about other examples? It's not all bad, no? This is what probably a smart city looks like better, no? It's when people empowered through technology can organize themselves and produce change. I know that what happens after is yet to be discussed, but at least this is a clear example that in one moment of time, people can use technology to articulate themselves and do something. What about the emergent or temporary cities? No? This is a very clear example of a model of a future society without money in a temporary city in the state of Nevada, in the Burning Man Festival. This is the third largest city of the whole Nevada state, but lasts only for 1 week. And people that go here, they don't use money and then exchange just favors or tasks or values just based on goodwill, let's say, no? Of course, there is a lot of parties and hippism, but it's really nice. What about the emergent construction of a city? No? This is a very nice example. This is the Torre de David in Caracas, where I am from. This was supposed to be one of the tallest buildings in Latin America, constructed by a bank. And what happened is that in the 90s, there was a huge financial crisis in Latin America, and then the bank bankrupted. And then a socialist government headed by Chavez came into the country. And what happened is basically that future bank tower or office tower was taken by people, and they created a vertical city. So you could actually go to the floor 23 to get a haircut. You can go to the floor 35 to buy groceries and so on. And this is the Torre de David. It actually was a research led by the urban think tank, was awarded by the Golden Lion in the Venice Biennale in 2014. So this is what I call the smart citizens, people that can use any tools they have around them to produce their own city. No? And then one of the really clear examples are the slums in the world, where people use the means that they just have in hand and the skills they have in hand to actually produce the space that they want to live in, right? And this has been something very interesting, because in the past, these slums were considered like something illegal, something to take out of the city. But now, if you see the big construction in the top of that slum, that's actually a transportation system. It's a cable car that is actually connecting the slum with the rest of the city. So somehow it's been accepted that this informal city is part of a formal city. So if you look at this, this is very different from creating Brasilia, no? Brasilia versus Petare in Caracas is totally different thing, no? So somehow there is this struggle between the centralized way of, the top-down approach of making things from the bottom up, no? And the thing is that, we really need to reconsider the way we make things today and how dependent we are of how those things are made. Not only because we have to buy them, but also because we are compromising, or we don't know which are the materials that are used or the processes that are used to produce those things. This whole culture of rethinking how we make things and empowering the people is not new. It's something, again, I'm constructing all my reflection on top of many knowledge created during time. But I really like this approach of the whole Earth catalog. Probably is the initiator of the DIY movement back in the 60s, no? And it's actually it's a coincidence. It's a consequence, I would say, of having the Apollo 11 going to the moon and taking the first picture from the moon to the Earth. So we basically got the consciousness about that this is our home somehow, no? And we have to do something to keep it. And that started a lot of movements around sustainability and the green movement and the like. So connected to this and jumping, having the digital revolutions of computation and having the digital evolution of internet, I jump into the race of the Fab Labs during the last 10 years and so on, no? So digital fabrication laboratories that started to appear in different countries. This is a map from 2008, 29 Fab Labs. This is a map from 2011, 68 Fab Labs. And this is somehow showing a little bit of the growth of a network in the registration of the FabLabs.io platform during the last couple years, no? So you start to see how these laboratories start to spread access to tools, but in this case, it's digital tools, connected tools. It's not just a magazine, as it was the whole Earth catalog, but imagine like a live magazine connected to tools where you can make things everywhere in the world and people is sharing it in open source. So today we have 615 Fab Labs. These are not just spaces with machines. This is people that gather every year in a different city in the world. We're going to gather this year in Fab 12. This is a network that shares an educational program like the Fab Academy. This is a network that is looking not only how we make things, but also how we make the things that make things. This is a Machines That Make Machines program, which aims to create a Fab Lab in a Fab Lab, and then in the future actually being able not even to need machines to make things, which is the Bio Academy, which is actually the future of fabrication. Is not using materials in one hand, information in the other, and machines in the other, but actually having all of those together. So we will be able to introduce codes into materials and they will be programming themselves. And that's not that crazy because it's actually how you have been created by nature. So again, spaces, people interfacing in a platform such as the FabLabs.io, in where people is documenting projects on actually sending satellites connected with the previous lecture, creating autonomous and electric bikes in open source. Yep, this is the robots to be deployed in disaster situations or into space. Low-cost incubators, sex toys, prosthetics, program to be shared between the Latin American network. This is a customizable chair made by more than 15 Fab Labs for 1 week with children at the same time in Latin America. One really beautiful project that actually was awarded by the Fab Awards. And the Smart Citizen, which is, I just put it because I started it, and then which is a low-cost sensor device for people to capture information about the city and share it in open source. So this all has been happening in the world of Fab Labs, only in 10 years. So people from learning how to use these machines that you can see here to actually to start to produce projects that could lead to a larger transformation in our cities, in our society. And make us think actually how we can change anything. Imagine how you die, how you live, how you go to the toilet, how you eat, how you exchange value, how you trade with people. It's going to change completely when the means of production are democratized and it's not only being administrated by just few hands, but it's actually in the hands of many people. And that raises a lot of questions, no? And questions that we have been trying to address inside IAC and FabLab Barcelona, again, for the last 10 years. Not only setting up a FabLab as a technology hub where we can make architecture prototypes, but actually from the very beginning linking it with a meaningful, let's say, goal for the FabLab. I like to take this example because I used to skateboard, and then when I wanted a skateboard, I had to convince my mom to buy me a skateboard. So I have to manipulate my mom to buy me that skateboard. But these kids, they learn how to make their own skateboard. They actually can bypass that really awful part that you have to pretend that you behave good in order for you to get a skateboard, which is really, really silly, no? Which is actually basically probably all the odds we have is we always want someone to give us what we need, and we don't take it because we haven't been empowered enough to do it. So at FabLab Barcelona, we have made cars. We are connected to the FabLab network, of course. We are starting the Green Fab Lab in the mountains of Collserola, which is outside of a city, just 20 minutes drive. A lot of you that are here have been there. We have been doing projects like the Smart Citizen that becomes a spin-off itself of a Fab Lab. As I said before, this is a project that we started in the Fab Lab. We launched a Kickstarter campaign. We made the first sensors, and now is part of a larger research project in the European Union, moving an economy of more than €1 million in the next 3 years. We made probably the first 0-kilometer restaurant of a neighborhood of Poblenou in Barcelona. It's a restaurant that we made in the Fab Lab, and it was 2 blocks away from the restaurant itself. So we were producing it with our machines and taking each one of the pieces and constructing in real time. Of course, we are inside the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia. We do houses. The FabLab house is a project that you can go to our wiki and you can download it and make it if you want to make it. We have made solar pavilions, and also thinking about a new way of producing architecture using robots. In this case, the lower right image is a project that actually aims to use swarms of robots to make buildings bigger than the robots themselves, which is actually one of the limitations of fabrication. So you have seen we go from a circuit board to a piece of furniture to a house to actually to a city. And that's where we started in Barcelona in 2011, and we made it public in 2014 through the Fab City project. This is Neil Gershenfeld and Mayor Trias, former Mayor Trias in Barcelona. And we made the mayor to press a button to take the public compromise that turned Barcelona into a self-sufficient city in the next 40 years. 40 years is enough time for him to commit because probably he won't be alive. But also it's a time span in which we can actually make things to happen. The truth is that the Fab City is not only about just putting Fab Labs into a city and see what happens, but it's actually totally a change in the mindset on how systems work. And actually, it's a cultural transformation about how we make things and actually how we envision the future and how we make the future to work. This is how we think that the Fab Lab should not be introduced into the bureaucracy systems of the city, but actually should be used as Trojan horses to hack the bureaucracy system of the city. In order to avoid that the new politicians have the picture in the paper next to a machine. So this is like now the new fashion of the politicians is to be pictured inaugurating a Fab Lab next to a milling machine or to a laser cutter. So, or pressing a button to commit to the Fab City. This is the mayor of Boston. This is the deputy mayor of economy and culture of Amsterdam. No? So now this has become into a global initiative. So we have all these cities as part of a Fab City project, which we are still developing. So it's really interesting to see that people say, hey, we want to join the Fab City. Well, we say, we don't know what is it yet. you can join to actually to construct it while we're doing it. No? I used to say that we are flying an airplane while building it, right? So that's what the Fab City is. It's not a model that we're going to implement or that someone needs to follow, but it's a live project that we are going to be constructing together with the FabLab network in order to basically transform culture through the access of a means of production. Starting with the Fab Labs, but this is not replacing industry with Fab Labs. It's about thinking how we can have a multi-scalar, complementary manufacturing and production ecosystem that goes from the 3D printer that you can have in your house and you can make small things or your glass frames or whatever, to your local Fab Lab, to the local industry in a city, to the large-scale industries by regions or countries, to the factories in China. We will still need to make things in China, but we don't need to make everything in China because it's cheap. It just doesn't make sense, sorry. So we think that this is going to, if you think that one of the first diagrams I showed you introduced a model of the cities that import products and produce trash, we can have cities producing what they need inside their own area and then just only exchange information on how things are made. So this is going to transform the economy, definitely, right? So the thing is like how we can build a distributed economy. Maybe we won't need banks. Maybe we won't need the intermediaries to do this because we will have in contact directly with the production means. And that might sound naive, but it's something that we have to repair to. That the centralized, the middleman, and many other or the speculation is going to disappear in a world in which things are directly connected, the needs with the solutions are directly connected, and the means to production are directly connected with those needs and with those solutions. No? So we imagine that this is how, instead of sending containers, shipping containers to one side of another of the world, the only thing that you send between cities is just information on how things are made. So if you want to make a piece of furniture, you don't need to put it in an airplane and fly it to another place, but actually you just send the file, and it could be made in a local Fab Lab or factory anywhere in the world. So we launched this back in, as I say, we launched the Fab City in the Fab conference in Barcelona in 2014. And just to conclude, this is probably a deep, as I said, a deep cultural change. This is actually going to challenge Fab Labs to become more than cool spaces or spaces to keep cool nerds doing things that satisfy only themselves. It's about to find a role of the Fab Labs into the society, and we are really looking forward to build this together with a group of people worldwide. And it's not only just a model that we aim people to follow because we just had a cool idea. So we think that in the next 5 years, we're going to see a deep transformation in the role of Fab Labs within the Fab cities. We're going to see also a transformation on the whole maker movement, and not only to be cool and to do drones that we don't know what they do, but actually to start to connect directly with the real needs of the society and the real needs of the cities itself. So now I would prefer, instead of keep talking, because I can keep talking for hours, to open a discussion, to see if someone wants to make any question. I'm ready for that. Thank you.
Ils sont. Bonjour, en fait, je peux traduire si jamais il y a des questions en français vers l'espagnol, parce que j'ai la chance aussi de parler espagnol. Donc voilà, je suis là pour aider. Si vous avez des questions.
So I had a question because you were speaking about, so if I understood where the concept is, a network of FabLab where you can exchange data to build things instead of just moving one thing to another place when you need it. But I was wondering, does it mean that you need to have the same tools from one FabLab to another, like a standard tools, or you can have tools to build one product, you can build with different tools that are not the same, that don't need the same data.
Yeah, this is not about like it's not like McDonald's, meaning like if you want to open a McDonald's, you have to buy this brand of French fryer and then this, I don't know, oven and this, you know, we talk about processes rather than tools itself. So it's not like specific tools, but actually processes, manufacturing processes. At the moment that we are today, those processes are very limited. When you talk about 3D printing, it's really not advanced at all. It's just like it's a machine with 3 motors that extrude plastic, or it's actually a platform that melts or solidify a liquid, etc. No? So, or a CNC machine that, again, 3 motors with a tool that is actually milling wood, that is an analog material, or a laser cutter that cuts fabrics, etc. So we are these really limited tools at the moment, at the state of the art that we have today. These tools are shared between Fab Labs, these technologies, right? The manufacturing technologies. These are not only limited to Fab Labs. The industry that we have today use most of these tools as well. CNC machines to make it from the clothes that you wear to these chairs, to this stage, to this furniture, and to all, even the parts of this building. No? So it's already somehow happening. What we have seen is that an extreme centralization of production only driven by profit, meaning that we have those tools in our cities. It's not that, you know, if you go to industrial areas, you will see that a lot of factories, they have unused machines just because it's cheaper to make it in China, right? And it's cheaper to pay those products to be flew to the different parts of the world. So what we are saying is that the Fab Labs are not the solution, but are part of the solution. The Fab Labs will be or can be catalyzers of promoting the reindustrialization of the city. When we reconsider which are the consequences of doing things only for profit, when we reconsider also the consequences for the environment of shipping things using fossil fuels, when we reconsider also the social consequences of using very cheap labor in countries in Asia, but also the social consequence of us becoming useless, because we just are learning to be part of a service economy and not part of a productive economy. So that created the whole educational system in which you go to school, then you are told to study a career that is given to you to fit in a socioeconomic model. Probably you will hate to be a lawyer. Probably you will hate the people that work with you in your job, and you hate your job. And you will get money to buy things that probably you don't need because someone needs to sell them because have massively produced in millions, right? And that is done together with the advertising agencies. And it's something that I don't say. I mean, if you read Victor Papanek's book, Design for the Real World, it's very clear. Stephen Emond, I mean, it's not something I'm making out. It's like, okay, this is considered as a big problem. You can see it everywhere. What we can do is the thing. How we can change basically cities, because it's where people is going to be living. According to the projections of the United Nations, we're going to be in 2050, 75% of the world population will be living in cities. What happens if these cities are following the same pattern that we have been following during the last 200 years is that basically we're going to fuck off everything, right? So we're saying, hey, wait a second. We have this thing happening for the last 10 years. There is a lot of passionate, talented people that want to live differently. They can bring things to life that actually can change the way we relate to the built world. Why don't we connect this with an urban strategy and try to point to a bigger goal for Fab Labs rather than just self-satisfaction of an individual, but actually putting the challenge of turning these places into catalysts for a new productive model. I don't know if that's an answer for that question, but and again, it's not only about the Fab Labs. The Fab Labs are just catalyzers. The success of the Fab City project or the Fab Labs itself is actually to make the Fab Labs disappear. The success will be not having to go to a Fab Lab to make things, but actually making things becomes part of your everyday life. And I always put the example of IKEA. And for those that have been listening to me, they know it almost by memory. But it's like you now go to IKEA that is located in a warehouse outside of a city. And the warehouse is full of products that have been shipped in containers to that place using fossil fuels and using cheap labor in some country that we don't know, and using materials that come from probably an exploitation that is really screwing someone's life on some ecosystem, right? And then we buy really cheap things and we assemble themselves in our house. But that cost that we are paying for a really cheap IKEA furniture is not true. We are just taking a loan of the future, right? We are loaning time for the future in terms of the resources. What we can do instead is like, it's not about IKEA, disappear IKEA, let's make everything in the Fab Labs. No, it's IKEA, instead of having warehouse outside the cities, start to have manufacturing, local manufacturing places in which you co-design and you make your furniture or whatever else IKEA wants to sell. They're changing somehow their strategy and going to more sustainable things like solar panels and hydroponic systems. But then you manufacture on demand, you probably use trash as a raw material, and then you don't only buy a product, but actually you buy the experience and the knowledge to make a product. And that, we think, is going to generate value, skills, knowledge, and somehow happiness, we hope. So.
Hello. Can you make a link between the Fab City project and the movement of transition towns?
The truth, I mean, it's not only about the, it's a really good question because I talked about the smart city as a kind of criticism, right? But it's true that we need better technologies into the cities and we need infrastructure as well, no? So I think that we are placing the Fab City as a complementary movement to other movements. No? The transition towns, for sure, is part of this. The shareable city, the green city. You can take like many different movements that are part of a change of how we use time, how we use resources, which are our values, how we relate not only with how we understand cities not only as the big masses or the big extension of the big metropolis, but also smaller urban areas. And they are part of a connected ecosystem of living areas in which people can exchange what they know about how to make things, and not only how to make things, but as an object, but also connecting it with the ability of producing your own energy, connecting it with the ability of producing your own food, connecting with the ability to create your own chain of values that you can exchange between networks. So this is, I would say that this is not an only thing, but it's part of a larger vision that many people is pushing forward. And I think that the sweetness of what's happening is that we are in a convergence of way of thinking together with technology that as it happened 200 years ago. So the big changes I think in humanity have happened when there has happened this how you call it, that coincidence. For instance, to have the printing press and to have the steam machine and to have the internet and to have the computers, and now emerging technologies like digital fabrication, blockchains that are promising so many things. So all these things together with the collapse of an old system is going to produce a massive change. How we're going to call it, I don't really care. I just want to make it. And I think this is more like a confederate. It's not like to say, oh, we did it first. We wanted the transition towns or the shareable cities. I would say that we're part of a movement. We say that also the Fab City is a project, but it's also a movement. But it's part of a larger movement that doesn't belong to us somehow. More questions?
Hello. So you talked about different cities who adopted your concept of Fab City, but could you explain a little bit more how it does work? Is it the city that comes to you and asks for some help, or are you going to the cities? And when a new city wants to adopt a concept, who is managing all the things?
Yeah, well, this has been completely emergent project. I mean, the short question would be, I don't know. And the polite question in what I have to say is that, yes, we are working on that. But no, as I said before, this is a plane that we already took off, and it's not finished somehow. So we have basic principles, no? It's basically using the main Fab City principle here is using the FabLab network of makerspaces of this movement as a catalyzer to transform an extractive model of the cities to a productive one, right? And also to promote it through the centralized networks. That's a basic line in which all these people, hey, we want to be part of that, right? We don't know what you are doing, but we want to be part of that. What we are working now, and that was part of a Fab City summit that we did in Amsterdam 2 weeks ago, is we gather a group of almost 40 people, and some of them are here in this room, that we went in Amsterdam, we sat together in an afternoon in different rooms, and we started to discuss, okay, what we want to do with this, what this means, what is our manifesto, which is the requirements for a Fab City to join, and what happens the day after a Fab City joins. No? So also that what we are trying to move, or at least what we're trying to transform is the interpretation that a Fab City is a city full of Fab Labs, which is not, right? So we're really trying to push forward to compromise publicly civic leaders, but also to have a local leadership in the making that can actually start to run activities, right? So this is something that probably will be ready in the FabLab conference in Shenzhen this summer, and we're going to have a more, let's say, concrete process for a Fab City to join, and also for specific goals in the cities in the years to come to become a Fab City, which we say, let's say we can put it in very simple terms. It's like we can commit the cities to reduce 1% per year the amount of things they import, or reduce the amount of electricity that is produced externally from the city, or the food, no? So you can start to think about the metrics, about also mapping the existing infrastructure that you have in a city that has been abandoned in order to bring back this idea of producing locally, no? So there are some ideas around that, no? And I think that it will need more work between different people in different perspectives, and I hope that it will be published in our website by August. Yeah, it's not a concrete answer, but the truth is that there is no answer yet. With someone
here. My question is maybe a version of a previous question, but I wanted to ask, how do, because the urbanization is a challenge also for the rural areas, it presents a specific challenge. So how does it fit into the project of Fab cities? How do you consider the rural areas? Are they extensions of the urban areas, or is there a consideration, or is it a separate question?
We don't care. No.
Yeah.
no. I think that it's difficult to say what's rural and what's not rural today. Somehow, I think we have an urban way of living. Almost, you can say that already more than half of the population lives in cities as today. But also, it's true that even a lot more of people have an urban life. It's people that can live in in the middle of nowhere, but they are connected to the internet, or they have an attitude towards consumption that actually is replicated from the actual model we created in the Western world, let's say. No? One answer is that I think that this is part of the urban way of living. So even if the Fab Labs were actually conceived as a means for production to these remote areas. For instance, the first Fab Labs were born in Ghana, in Norway, and in India, in Pune. The very first was in Boston, but these ones outside the US were in these countries, and especially the one in India, in Bigyan Ashram, was conceived as a small factory where people, instead of going to the city that was 5 hours by a bus, they could actually solve their own problems locally through those means. No? I think it's not different from that. No? I think, in one hand, this is not scalable, but has different scales. So it's not that we want to scale as every other business wants to do, but it's actually to play with different scales. And in that small scale, play these urban areas, and actually they can gain more self-sufficiency, but at the same time connected with the rest of networks. No? And also, I think that if we start to understand the cities and the cities as an organisms, you will start to see that these rural areas that supply the cities sometimes, they're actually part of the game. No? They are part of the city itself. And unfortunately, the creation of really mass agriculture, or really being a really destructive process of economy we have today, have killed that diversity we had around cities in the past. It would be nice to think about these rural areas and recover, and as well to connect with this need for the city to be supplied with with a variety of things that come from maybe hundreds of kilometers, but not thousands. So I think there is a whole, again, it's to think about systems of systems in different scales, rather than to separate what's urban, what is a city, what is not. No? They're saying me that over. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I see you around.